Minho Kang stood at the altar in his custom-tailored tuxedo, surrounded by 300 of Seoul's most influential people, and made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He turned and walked away, leaving Emma Chen waiting in her white dress, her heart shattering in front of everyone who mattered. What he didn't know, what he wouldn't discover until 5 years later, was that the truth he believed that day was a lie. And by the time he learned what really happened, the damage was irreversible. Before we begin the story, comment below with the city you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. 5 years earlier, Minho Kang had everything a 30-year-old man could want. As the sole heir to Kang Corporation, one of South Korea's most powerful conglomerates, his life had been mapped out since birth. The Seoul mansion, the elite education, the board position waiting for him. His future was a straight line toward power, wealth, and the continuation of a dynasty that had dominated Korean business for 3 generations. But Minho had always been different from his father. Where Chairman Kang was cold and calculating, Minho possessed a warmth that made people feel seen. Where his father viewed relationships as transactions, Minho believed in genuine connection. It was this difference that led him to San Francisco for his MBA, against his father's wishes, seeking to understand business beyond the insular world of Seoul's elite. That's where he met Emma Chen. It was during orientation week at Stanford. The California sun streamed through the windows of the business school's atrium, and Minho was trying to navigate the crowd of ambitious students when he literally collided with someone carrying an impossible stack of textbooks. Books scattered across the polished floor. Minho immediately dropped to his knees to help gather them, apologizing profusely in his slightly accented English. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't watching where I was." He looked up and found himself staring into eyes that seemed to hold all the warmth of a summer afternoon. The young woman laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "It's okay. I was the one trying to carry half the bookstore at once." She was petite, with long dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a Stanford t-shirt. No makeup, no designer labels, just natural beauty and an easy smile that made Minho's heart skip. "I'm Minho," he said, handing her a thick economics textbook. "Emma," she replied, their fingers briefly touching as she took the book. "Emma Chen. And thank you for not letting my academic ambitions literally crush me." Minho found himself smiling wider than he had in months. "Are you always this optimistic about disasters?" "Always," Emma said. "My parents taught me that attitude matters more than circumstances, though they might reconsider that philosophy if they knew how much I just spent on textbooks." Over the next few weeks, Minho found himself gravitating toward Emma in every class they shared. She was brilliant but humble, driven but kind, competitive in academics, but generous with her time helping others understand difficult concepts. She came from a middle-class family in Los Angeles. Her father was a high school teacher, her mother a nurse. She'd earned her way to Stanford through scholarships and sheer determination. She was everything Minho's world wasn't. Genuine, unpretentious, real. They began studying together at the library, sessions that stretched late into the night as discussions about market theory turned into conversations about life, dreams, fears, and hopes. Emma spoke about wanting to start a non-profit that provided business education to underserved communities. Minho found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone: his struggles with his father's expectations, his desire to lead Kang Corporation differently, his fear that he'd never be seen as anything beyond his family name. "You're not your family," Emma told him one night as they sat on the library steps, the campus quiet around them. "You're Minho. And from what I can see, that's someone pretty special." No one had ever separated him from his name before. No one had ever seen just him. 3 months into their friendship, during a study group that had dwindled to just the 2 of them, Minho finally admitted what he'd been feeling since that first collision in the atrium. "Emma, I need to tell you something." She looked up from her laptop, her expression open and curious. "What's up?" "I think I'm falling in love with you," Minho said, his heart pounding. "Actually, I know I am, and I needed to say it because I can't keep pretending I'm just your study partner." Emma's eyes widened. and for a terrible moment Minho thought he'd ruined everything. Then she smiled, that beautiful wind chime laugh escaping. "Well, that's a relief," she said. "Because I've been falling for you since you helped pick up my books and looked at me like I was the most interesting person you'd ever met." Their first kiss happened right there in the library study room, gentle and sweet and full of promise. The next 2 years were the happiest of Minho's life. Emma and he were inseparable, studying together, exploring San Francisco, building a relationship that felt both exciting and comfortable. She met his friends from Seoul, though Minho noticed how some of them looked at Emma with barely concealed disdain. She wasn't from their world, wasn't wealthy, wasn't Korean. But Minho didn't care. Emma made him feel like he could be anyone he wanted to be. Emma introduced Minho to her parents during winter break. Her family's modest home in LA was filled with warmth, her mother's cooking, her father's terrible jokes, the easy affection between them. It was so different from the cold formality of the Kang household, where meals were business meetings, and affection was weakness. "Your family is wonderful," Minho told Emma, as they sat in her childhood bedroom, looking at photos of her growing up. "They're excited to meet you," Emma said. "Mom keeps asking when she can start planning the wedding." Minho froze. "Wedding?" Emma laughed. "I'm kidding. Well, half kidding. She's very traditional. She thinks if we've been together this long, marriage is the obvious next step." "What do you think?" Minho asked carefully. Emma turned to look at him, her expression serious. "I think I love you. I think I can see a future with you. But I also know your world is very different from mine. I'm not naive, Minho. I know what it means that you're heir to a massive Korean conglomerate, and I'm just a girl whose dad teaches calculus to high schoolers." "You're not just anything," Minho said firmly. "You're the most remarkable person I know." "I know you believe that," Emma said softly. "But does your family?" It was a question Minho had been avoiding. He'd told his father about Emma in carefully vague terms. A fellow student, a friend, someone important to him. His father's response had been dismissive. "Focus on your studies," Chairman Kang had said. "You can socialize with appropriate people when you return to Seoul." Appropriate people. Minho knew exactly what that meant. Korean, wealthy, connected to families his father approved of. But Minho loved Emma, and as graduation approached, he made a decision. He would marry her, with or without his father's blessing. 6 months after graduation, Minho proposed. He'd planned it carefully. A picnic at their favorite spot overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, the fog rolling in as the sun set, painting everything in shades of gold and gray. "Emma Chen," he said, dropping to one knee as her eyes widened in surprise. "You've made me believe in a future I never thought possible. You've shown me who I am beyond my family name. Will you marry me?" Emma's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." The ring Minho slipped onto her finger had been his grandmother's, a family heirloom he'd had reset, blending Korean tradition with modern design. It was his way of saying Emma would be part of the Kang family, whether his father accepted it or not. That night, Minho called his father to share the news. "I'm engaged," he said, unable to keep the joy from his voice. "To Emma. I want to bring her to Seoul, to meet you properly, to—" "Absolutely not," Chairman Kang interrupted, his voice cold. "You will not marry this girl." Minho's stomach dropped. "Father, I love her. She's nobody. No family connections, no wealth, not even Korean. This marriage would be an embarrassment to the Kang name." "With respect, Father." "I don't care," Minho said, his voice steady despite his anger. "I'm marrying Emma. I hope you'll choose to be part of our life, but if not, if you marry her, you'll be disinherited," his father said flatly. "Cut off completely. No position at Kang Corporation, no access to the family fortune, nothing. You'll be nobody, just like her." The line went dead. Emma found Minho sitting on their apartment balcony, staring at nothing. She sat beside him, taking his hand. He threatened to disinherit you, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes. Minho, I can't let you give up everything for me. Your family, your future. You are my future, Minho interrupted. Emma, I don't want the Kang fortune if it means losing you. We'll build our own life. I'll get a job in business consulting. You'll start your nonprofit. We'll be happy. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They planned a small wedding in San Francisco. Emma's family, a few close friends, nothing like the elaborate soul ceremonies Minho had grown up attending. Simple and genuine, just like their relationship. But 3 weeks before the wedding, Minho received a call from his mother. She rarely contacted him. Chairman Kang controlled most family communication, so Minho's heart raced when he saw her name. Minho, she said, her voice strained. I need you to come home. There's something you must know before you make this mistake. It's not a mistake, Mother. I love Emma. Come home, she repeated. If you truly care about this girl, you'll come hear what I have to say. Then you can make an informed decision. Against Emma's worried protests, Minho flew to Seoul the next day. His mother met him at the family mansion, her face drawn and tired. What is it? Minho asked. What's so urgent? His mother handed him a folder. Your father hired investigators to look into Emma's background. What they found... Minho opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, documents, emails. His eyes scanned the pages, his blood running cold. The documents showed Emma meeting with representatives from rival companies, email exchanges discussing Kang Corporation's business strategies, information she could have only gotten from Minho's unguarded conversations, bank statements showing deposits to an account in her name, payments that coincided with the dates of their most intimate conversations about his family's business. No, Minho whispered. This can't be real. I'm sorry, his mother said, and she actually looked pained. Your father suspected from the beginning. Why else would a girl like her be interested in you? She's been using you for corporate espionage this entire time. Minho felt like he was falling, the ground disappearing beneath him. Everything he believed, everything he felt, had it all been a lie? There's more, his mother said quietly. Emma isn't even her real name. She's actually a hired operative. Her parents are actors. Everything about her is fabricated. Minho stared at the documents, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. Emma, who'd made him feel seen and loved and valued for himself. She'd been playing him all along. What do I do? He asked, his voice hollow. You end it, his mother said firmly. Publicly and definitively. Show her that the Kang family cannot be manipulated. Show everyone that you're strong enough to put family loyalty above foolish sentiment. Minho flew back to San Francisco in a daze. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He kept looking at the photographs, the emails, trying to reconcile the Emma he knew with the calculated operative these documents portrayed. Emma met him at the airport, her face bright with relief and love. You're back. I missed you so much. How did it go with your mother? Minho couldn't even look at her. We need to talk. Over the next few days, Minho became cold and distant. Emma noticed immediately, her concern growing with each terse response, each avoided question. Minho, what's wrong? She asked. Ever since you got back from Seoul, you've been different. Did your parents say something? Whatever it is, we can work through it together. But Minho couldn't tell her what he knew. Some part of him, some desperate part, hoped she would confess on her own, that she would tell him the truth and they could somehow salvage this. She never did. The wedding day arrived. Emma's family had traveled from LA, her few friends from Stanford were there. The small venue was decorated simply but beautifully. Emma stood in the bride's room, her mother helping adjust her veil, her face glowing with happiness and love. Minho stood in the groom's room, staring at himself in the mirror. He'd brought the folder with him, unable to leave it behind. The evidence of Emma's betrayal felt like it was burning through his jacket. His phone rang. His father. I trust you'll do the right thing, Chairman Kang said. Show her what happens to people who try to use the Kang family. Minho hung up without responding. The music started. The guests stood. Emma appeared at the back of the aisle, beautiful in her simple white dress, her eyes finding Minho's across the distance. She smiled, that same wind chime laugh in her expression, and for a moment, just a moment, Minho's resolve wavered. Then he remembered the documents, the lies, the betrayal. Emma walked down the aisle, her father's arm linked with hers. With each step, she seemed to glow brighter, completely unaware of what was about to happen. She reached the altar. Her father placed her hand in Minho's, then stepped back. Emma looked up at Minho, love and trust shining in her eyes. The officiant began, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Minho felt like he was underwater, the words distant and muffled. Emma's hand in his was warm, familiar. This was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. The officiant reached the critical moment. "If anyone has any reason these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence stretched. Emma's smile widened, relief and joy mixing in her expression, and Minho spoke. "I do." The room went completely still. Emma's smile froze, confusion replacing joy. "What?" she whispered. Minho pulled his hand away from hers. "I can't do this. I can't marry you." "Minho, what are you talking about?" Emma's voice shook. We're getting married right now, what?" "I know what you did," Minho said, his voice louder now, carrying to every shocked guest. "I know who you really are, what you've been doing. Using me, spying on my family, selling information to our competitors." Emma's face went white. "What? No, Minho, I don't understand. What are you saying?" "Don't lie anymore," Minho said coldly. "I have proof. Documents, photographs, everything. You played me perfectly. Almost had me convinced you actually cared. But I know the truth now." Tears were streaming down Emma's face, her hands reaching for him. "Minho, please, whatever you think you know, it's wrong. I love you, I would never—" "Save it," Minho interrupted. He turned to face the crowd, addressing everyone. "I apologize for wasting your time. This wedding is cancelled." He pulled the ring off his finger and placed it on the altar. Then he turned and walked down the aisle, leaving Emma standing there in her wedding dress, her world crumbling around her. Behind him, he heard her sob, a broken, desperate sound that would haunt his dreams for years. But he kept walking, kept moving, his father's voice in his head telling him he'd done the right thing. Emma's voice rang out, raw with pain. "Minho, please, let me explain. You don't understand what's happening." But Minho didn't turn back. He couldn't. If he looked at her face, he might break, and he couldn't afford to be weak. He left the venue, got into his car, and drove away from the woman he loved, or thought he'd loved, from the liar who'd played him for a fool. Emma's cries echoed in his ears even after he could no longer hear them. Minho returned to Seoul the next day. His father greeted him with rare approval. "You did well," Chairman Kang said. "You showed strength." "That's what a Kang does. Protects the family no matter the personal cost." Minho nodded numbly. He felt nothing. Not pride, not relief, not even anger anymore. Just a vast, empty hollowness where his heart used to be. He threw himself into work at Kang Corporation, taking on the executive role his father had always intended for him. 18-hour days, constant travel, endless meetings. Anything to avoid thinking about Emma, about the wedding day, about the life he'd almost had. His father watched his transformation with satisfaction. The soft, idealistic son who'd gone to Stanford had been replaced by someone harder, colder, more like Chairman Kang himself. Someone who understood that sentiment was weakness. But late at night, alone in his Seoul penthouse, Minho would find himself thinking about Emma. Her laugh, the way she'd looked at him like he mattered beyond his name, the gentleness in her touch. He'd pull out his phone, find her contact, he'd never deleted it, and hover over the call button. But he never pressed it. What would he say? He'd made his choice. He'd walked away from her in front of everyone, called her a liar and a spy. destroyed her reputation. And she deserved it. He'd seen the evidence. Years passed. Min-ho became exactly what his father wanted, a ruthless businessman, focused solely on expanding the Kang Empire. He dated occasionally, women from appropriate families, relationships that were pleasant but empty. None of them made him feel the way Emma had. He told himself that was good. Feelings clouded judgment. His father had been right all along. 5 years after the wedding that never was, Min-ho attended a business conference in Singapore. Kang Corporation was exploring partnerships in Southeast Asia, and Min-ho was there to scope out potential investments. During a networking session, Min-ho found himself in conversation with a Korean-American businessman named James Park. "I've heard great things about Kang Corporation," James said. "Your expansion into tech sectors has been impressive." "Thank you," Min-ho replied, his tone professional but distant. "Actually," James continued, "I think I have a connection to your family. Didn't you go to Stanford? I think my sister was in your MBA program." "Possibly," Min-ho said. "It was a while ago." "Yeah, she was there around 2017, 2018. Emma Park, well, she goes by her English name, Emma Chen, for some reason. Always thought that was weird." Min-ho froze. "Emma Chen?" "Yeah, you do know her, small world. How is she? I haven't talked to her in a few months." Min-ho's mind was reeling. "She's your sister?" "Yeah, my little sister. We're not super close. I was always busy with work and she was focused on school. But she's a good kid. Brilliant, actually. She's doing amazing work with her nonprofit now, helping underprivileged communities access business education." Every word felt like a hammer blow. "Your sister," Min-ho repeated. "Emma Chen is your sister." "Born Emma Park, yeah. Is something wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Min-ho excused himself abruptly and went to the bathroom, his hands shaking. He pulled out his phone and started searching. Emma Park, Emma Chen, Stanford MBA 2018. Articles popped up. Emma Park launches nonprofit to bridge education gap. Stanford alumna returns to LA to help her community. Emma Park's inspiring story, from scholarship student to social entrepreneur. In every article there were photos. Emma, older now but still with that same warm smile, working with students, teaching business principles to teenagers in underfunded schools. And in one article, there was a family photo. Emma with her parents, the same parents Min-ho had met in LA. And beside her, James Park, listed as her older brother. She was real. Her family was real. Everything about her had been real. Min-ho felt the world tilt. If Emma was who she said she was, if her family was genuine, then what were those documents his mother had shown him? With trembling fingers, Min-ho called his mother. It was late in Seoul, but she answered. "Min-ho, is everything all right?" "The documents," Min-ho said, his voice rough. "The ones you showed me about Emma." "About her being a spy. Where did they come from?" There was a long pause. "Your father's investigators. Why are you asking about this now?" "I need to know exactly who provided that information. Names, mother. Give me names." "Min-ho, what is this about?" "Just tell me." His voice was harsh, desperate. His mother gave him 2 names. Min-ho recognized them both, men who had worked for Kang Corporation's security division, men who were loyal to his father above all else. Min-ho spent the rest of the conference in his hotel room, making calls, pulling strings, using his position to access information he probably shouldn't have. And slowly, horribly, the truth began to emerge. The documents had been fabricated, the photographs doctored, the email exchanges completely manufactured. It had all been an elaborate scheme orchestrated by his father to separate Min-ho from Emma, to ensure he made the appropriate choice. There had never been any corporate espionage. Emma had never been anything but exactly who she claimed to be, a genuine, loving woman who'd seen Min-ho for himself, not his family name. And Min-ho had destroyed her, publicly humiliated her, accused her of being a liar and a spy in front of everyone she cared about. because he'd trusted his father more than he'd trusted the woman he loved. Minho sat on the hotel bed, his head in his hands, as the full weight of what he'd done crashed over him. He'd broken Emma's heart based on lies. He'd thrown away the best thing in his life because his father had manipulated him into it. 5 years. It had been 5 years since he'd walked away from her at that altar. 5 years of Emma living with the pain and humiliation of what he'd done. And he'd spent those 5 years becoming exactly like his father, cold, calculating, empty. Minho flew back to Seoul immediately. He stormed into his father's office without calling ahead. Chairman Kang looked up from his desk, surprised. "Minho, I thought you were in Singapore." "You lied to me," Minho said, his voice shaking with controlled rage. "About Emma. You fabricated everything, the documents, the photos, all of it." His father's expression didn't change. "I did what was necessary to protect the family." "Protect the family." Minho's voice rose. "You destroyed an innocent woman's reputation. You manipulated me into abandoning someone I loved." "She was nobody," Chairman Kang said dismissively. "A distraction from your responsibilities." "She was everything." Minho slammed his hand on the desk. "She was kind and genuine, and she loved me for who I was, not what I could give her. And you took that from me. You took the only real relationship I've ever had." "I made you strong," his father said coldly. "Look at what you've become. A true Kang. That wouldn't have happened with her softening you, making you weak." Minho stared at his father and saw, truly saw, what he'd become under his influence. Cold, ruthless, empty, exactly like the man sitting across from him. "I quit," Minho said. "Excuse me?" "I'm leaving Kang Corporation, effective immediately. I'm done being your puppet." Chairman Kang laughed, a harsh sound. "And go where? Do what? You have no other skills, no other life. You'll come crawling back." "Maybe," Minho said, "but I'd rather fail on my own than succeed by being like you." He walked out of his father's office and didn't look back. The next day, Minho began trying to find Emma. It wasn't easy. She'd apparently moved, changed her contact information, deliberately made herself difficult to locate. He couldn't blame her. Finally, through James Park, who was understandably suspicious of Minho's motives, he learned that Emma was living in Los Angeles, running her nonprofit from a small office in a community center. Minho flew to LA. His hands shook as the plane descended, terrifying scenarios playing in his mind. What if Emma refused to see him? What if she'd moved on, found someone else? What if the damage he'd done was too deep to ever repair? He deserved all of it. He knew that. But he had to try. He had to tell her the truth, apologize, beg for forgiveness, even though he had no right to ask for it. The nonprofit's office was in a modest building in a working-class neighborhood. Minho stood outside for 10 minutes, gathering courage, before finally walking in. A young woman at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Emma Chen, Emma Park. Is she here?" "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but please, it's important. Minho hesitated. "Tell her Minho Kang is here. She'll know who I am." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then hung up and looked at Minho with barely concealed hostility. "She says she doesn't want to see you. She'd like you to leave." Minho's heart sank, but he'd expected this. "Please, tell her I know the truth about what happened. Tell her I know my father lied. I just need 5 minutes to explain, to apologize. Then I'll leave and never bother her again if that's what she wants." The receptionist made another call. A long pause. Then she hung up. "Down the hall, last door on the right." Minho walked slowly down the corridor, his heart pounding. The walls were covered with photos of students, testimonials from people the nonprofit had helped, Emma's work, the dreams she'd talked about in those late nights at Stanford, the dream she'd built, despite everything he'd done to break her. He reached the last door. It was slightly ajar. He knocked softly. "Come in." Minho pushed the door open and saw Emma for the first time in 5 years. She sat behind a desk covered in papers and folders, her hair shorter now, professional attire replacing the casual student look he remembered. But her eyes, those eyes that had once looked at him with so much love, now held only guarded wariness. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, and the pain he saw in her expression was his fault. "Hello, Min-ho," Emma said, her voice carefully neutral. "Emma." His voice cracked. "Thank you for seeing me." "I almost didn't," she said. "But I figured you must have something important to say to come all this way. So say it." Min-ho stepped into the room but didn't sit down. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For what I did to you. For not trusting you. For humiliating you. For—" "Stop," Emma interrupted. "I don't need a list of your transgressions. I lived through them. What I need to know is why you're here now, 5 years later." "I discovered the truth," Min-ho said, "about the documents my mother showed me. About why I left you at the altar. Emma, it was all lies. My father fabricated everything to make me believe you were using me. The photos, the emails, all of it was manufactured." Emma's expression didn't change. "I know." Min-ho blinked. "You know?" "Of course I know," Emma said, her voice hardening slightly. "Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? That I wouldn't piece together what happened? Min-ho, you accused me of corporate espionage based on evidence I never saw, that you never let me address. You believed I was capable of spending 2 years pretending to love you just to steal business secrets." She stood up, her hands gripping the desk. "Do you know what that day did to me? Standing at that altar in front of my family, my friends, everyone I cared about, and having you announce to the world that I was a liar and a fraud. Do you know what it felt like to have the man I loved, the man I trusted completely, believe I was capable of that?" Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice stayed steady. "I lost friends over it, people who believed I must have done something to deserve that humiliation. I had to explain to my parents why their daughter's wedding turned into a public character assassination. I spent months barely able to function, barely able to get out of bed." "I know," Min-ho said, his own eyes burning. "I know, and I'm so sorry." "You don't know." Emma's voice rose. "You can't know, because you got to walk away. You got to go back to Seoul and your fancy job and your rich life. You got to be the righteous one, the victim of manipulation. I had to rebuild my entire life from ashes, carrying the weight of your accusation, never knowing why you believed I could do such a thing." She wiped her eyes roughly. "It took me a year to figure out what probably happened, that your father had manufactured evidence, but by then, you'd made it clear where your loyalty lay. You chose to believe documents over me. You chose your family over trusting the person who loved you more than anything." "I was wrong," Min-ho said desperately. "I should have trusted you. I should have come to you first, let you explain. I should have—" "Yes, you should have," Emma said simply. "But you didn't. And that tells me everything I need to know about who you are and what I actually meant to you." "Emma, please, you—" "Why are you here, Min-ho?" Emma asked. "What do you want from me? Forgiveness? Absolution? The chance to feel better about what you did?" "I don't deserve any of those things," Min-ho said. "I know I don't. But I needed you to know the truth, that I was wrong, that you were never what I accused you of being, that every moment we had together was real for me too, even if I threw it away." Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but still painful. "Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the public humiliation, though that was horrible. It wasn't even the heartbreak of losing you, though that nearly destroyed me." She looked directly at him. "The worst part was realizing that the man I loved, who I thought knew me, who I'd shared everything with, that man never actually trusted me. Because if you had, if you'd really known who I was, you would never have believed those lies. You would have come to me first. You would have fought for us." Min-ho felt like his heart was being crushed. "You're right, I should have, and I've regretted it every single day since." "Well," Emma said, walking around her desk to stand a few feet from him, "now you know what you gave up. A woman who loved you unconditionally, who would have stood by you through anything, who saw you for who you were beyond your family name. You gave that up because you trusted your father more than you trusted your own judgment. I left Kang Corporation, Minho said. I quit. I'm not part of that world anymore. Good for you, Emma said, and there was no sarcasm in her voice, just tired sincerity. I genuinely hope you find whatever you're looking for. I hope you build a life that makes you happy, that's authentic to who you are. Is there any chance? Minho started, then stopped. The question was too presumptuous, too selfish. Any chance of what? Emma prompted. That we could start over? That I could forgive you and we could go back to how things were? Minho nodded, not trusting his voice. Emma gave him a sad smile. Minho, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. You're not the same person either. What we had, it's gone. You can't humiliate someone like that, break them that completely, and expect them to just take you back with an apology. I know, Minho whispered. I don't hate you, Emma said. I did for a long time, but I've worked through that with a lot of therapy and a lot of time. What I feel now is sadness. Sadness for what we could have had if you'd been brave enough to trust me. Sadness that you let your father manipulate you into throwing away something real. Sadness that we both lost years we can never get back. She walked to the door and opened it. Thank you for coming to tell me the truth. It does help knowing it wasn't real, that I wasn't actually that blind about who you were. But Minho, this is goodbye. For real this time. Minho nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He walked toward the door, then paused beside her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. And destroying that is the biggest regret of my life. I know, Emma said softly, but knowing that doesn't change anything. Take care of yourself, Minho. Minho walked out of her office, down the corridor, past the receptionist who glared at him, and out into the LA sunshine. He stood on the sidewalk, feeling emptier than he'd ever felt in his life. He'd come for forgiveness and hadn't gotten it, but he'd gotten something perhaps more valuable, the truth about who Emma really was, confirmation that his gut instinct about her had been right all along, and the devastating knowledge of exactly what he'd given up. Over the next few months, Minho tried to rebuild his life outside of Kang Corporation. He took a consulting job, moved into a modest apartment in Seoul, started therapy to work through the emotional manipulation his father had subjected him to his entire life. And every day, he thought about Emma. He heard through James Park that Emma was thriving. Her nonprofit had expanded to 3 cities. She'd been featured in business magazines for her innovative approach to education. She was making a real difference in people's lives. She'd done exactly what she'd dreamed of doing when they'd sat on those library steps at Stanford, planning futures that seemed so bright and possible then. Minho was happy for her, and devastated that he wasn't part of it. 1 year after their meeting in LA, Minho received an unexpected email. It was from Emma. Minho, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. About forgiveness, about healing, about moving forward. I'm writing to tell you that I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to let go of the pain and anger I've been carrying. What you did was terrible, and it changed me in ways I'm still discovering. But I've come to understand that you were as much a victim of your father's manipulation as I was. That doesn't excuse your choice, but it helps me understand it. I hope you're building a good life. I hope you're learning to trust yourself, to make decisions based on your own values rather than others' expectations. I hope you find someone who makes you happy, someone you're brave enough to trust completely. We won't be friends. Too much has happened for that. But I want you to know that I don't wish you ill. I want you to heal and grow and find your way to a life that fulfills you. Take care, Emma. Minho read the email 3 times, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't an invitation back into her life, but it was grace, freely given, unearned, transformative. Emma had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for her own. and in doing so, she'd given him permission to finally forgive himself. Years continued to pass. Min-ho built a consulting firm focused on helping companies develop ethical business practices. He worked with nonprofits, taught business ethics at a local university, deliberately chose a path that honored the values Emma had once shown him. He dated occasionally, but never seriously. No one measured up to the woman he'd lost, and he was okay with that. Some mistakes were too profound to fully recover from. Some losses were permanent. He followed Emma's nonprofit from a distance, watching it grow and succeed. He donated anonymously, never wanting to impose his presence into her life again. She'd asked him to stay away, and he respected that. 10 years after the wedding that never was, Min-ho was invited to speak at a business ethics conference in San Francisco. As he stood at the podium, looking out at the audience of business students and professionals, he saw a familiar face in the crowd. Emma was sitting in the third row, her expression neutral but attentive. Their eyes met briefly before Min-ho had to look away to compose himself. He gave his speech about the importance of integrity, about not letting family pressure override personal values, about the human cost of unethical business decisions. He spoke from experience, from pain, from lessons learned the hardest possible way. When he finished, the audience applauded. As people filed out, Min-ho saw Emma approaching him. "That was a good speech," she said. Her voice was friendly but distant, the tone you'd use with an acquaintance, not someone you once loved. "Thank you," Min-ho replied, his heart pounding. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm on the advisory board for the business school now," Emma explained. "They asked me to attend some of these events. Your talk was honest. I appreciated that." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. "You look well," Min-ho said. "I am well," Emma replied. "I'm happy. I have work I love, people I care about. I've built a good life." There was a subtle emphasis on I that Min-ho didn't miss. She'd built this life without him, despite him, and she didn't need him in it. "I'm glad," Min-ho said, and he meant it. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." Emma studied his face carefully. "You're different than you were that day in LA. Less desperate, more at peace." "I'm trying," Min-ho said, "to be better than I was, to make choices that honor the person you always saw in me, even when I couldn't see it myself." Emma smiled, and it reached her eyes for the first time. "That's good, Min-ho, that's really good." "Emma," Min-ho said, knowing this might be the last time he saw her, "thank you for forgiving me, for that email. It gave me permission to start healing." "You're welcome," Emma said simply. "We both deserve to heal." She turned to leave, then paused and looked back. "Min-ho, I want you to know something. What happened between us, it nearly destroyed me, but it also made me stronger. I learned that I could survive the worst thing I could imagine and come out the other side. I learned to trust my own judgment, to build a life on my own terms. So in a strange way, as much as it hurt, it taught me things I needed to learn." "I'm glad something good came from my mistake," Min-ho said. "Not your mistake," Emma corrected gently. "Your mistake was the catalyst. What came from it was my choice, to heal, to grow, to build something meaningful. You don't get credit for that. But I wanted you to know that I'm okay, more than okay." And with that, she walked away, leaving Min-ho standing in the emptying auditorium. He would never get her back. He understood that now, completely. The woman he'd loved at Stanford was gone, transformed by pain into someone stronger, more guarded, less willing to risk her heart on someone who'd proven unworthy of it. But she was happy. She'd forgiven him. She'd found peace. And knowing that, Min-ho could finally start to forgive himself. Years later, Min-ho would look back on that day at the altar as the worst mistake of his life. He'd let fear and manipulation overcome trust and love. He'd chosen his family's approval over his own happiness. He'd destroyed something precious and irreplaceable. But he would also come to understand that some wounds never fully heal. Some relationships, once broken, can't be repaired. And that's okay. It's the natural consequence of our choices. the price we pay for the mistakes we make. Minho learned to live with his regret, not to overcome it or move past it, but to carry it as a reminder of what he'd lost, what he'd learned, and who he'd become in the aftermath. He never married, never found another Emma, but he built a life focused on integrity, on helping others avoid the mistakes he'd made, on being the person he should have been that day at the altar. And sometimes, late at night, he would think about what might have been. A life with Emma, children who had her laugh and his determination, growing old together with the person who'd seen him most clearly. It was the life he'd thrown away, the life he'd lost the moment he chose to believe lies over love. And he would carry that loss with him for the rest of his days. The years continued to pass, each one adding distance to that painful day at the altar. Minho threw himself into his work with a quiet determination that surprised even him. His consulting firm grew steadily, not through aggressive expansion like his father would have pursued, but through genuine relationships and ethical practices that honored the lessons he'd learned too late. But there were moments, unexpected, devastating moments, when the past would crash over him like a wave. One evening, Minho was walking through Insadong, Seoul's traditional neighborhood, when he passed a small gallery. In the window was a painting that stopped him cold. It depicted the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset, fog rolling in, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. It was the exact view from the spot where he'd proposed to Emma. Minho stood frozen on the sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around him like water around a stone. He remembered Emma's face that day, the shock, the joy, the tears streaming down her cheeks as she said yes. He remembered how her hands had trembled as he slipped his grandmother's ring onto her finger. He remembered believing, with absolute certainty, that they would spend the rest of their lives together. A young couple walked past him into the gallery, holding hands, laughing about something. The woman looked up at her partner with the same expression Emma had once given Minho: complete trust, unguarded love. Minho turned away, unable to watch. 3 years after the San Francisco conference, Minho received an invitation that made his hands shake. It was a wedding invitation. Emma's wedding. She was marrying someone named David Chen. No relation. The invitation clarified with subtle humor. A teacher at one of the schools her nonprofit partnered with. The wedding would be small, intimate, just family and close friends at a garden venue in Los Angeles. Minho stared at the invitation for a long time. Emma had moved on. Of course she had. It had been 13 years since that day at the altar. She deserved happiness, deserved someone who would choose her without hesitation, who would trust her completely. But the knowledge that she was giving her heart to someone else, someone worthy of it, felt like a knife twisting in Minho's chest. He wasn't invited to the wedding, he realized. The invitation had been sent to his business address as a courtesy, a formal announcement. Emma was telling him, in the kindest way possible, that this chapter was truly, finally closed. Minho sent an expensive crystal vase as a gift, unsigned, and tried not to think about Emma walking down an aisle in a white dress, this time reaching the end without being abandoned. The night of Emma's wedding, Minho sat in his apartment with a bottle of expensive whiskey he didn't drink. His phone buzzed with photos from James Park's social media. Emma looking radiant in a simple, elegant dress, her new husband gazing at her with obvious adoration, the two of them laughing during their first dance. Minho looked at the photos for a long time. Emma's smile was different from the one he remembered, more guarded perhaps, but also more peaceful. She'd been hurt and had healed. She'd learned to trust again, just not him. "I'm happy for you," Minho whispered to the photo on his screen, and he was. Beneath the pain, beneath the regret, he genuinely was. He poured the whiskey down the sink and went to bed. The next morning, Minho made a decision. He'd been holding on to guilt and regret like treasures, polishing them daily, keeping them close. But Emma had moved on. She'd built a beautiful life without him. The kindest thing he could do, for her and for himself, was to finally, truly let go. He donated his grandmother's ring, the one Emma had worn for those brief months, to a charity auction. He deleted the photos from Stanford he'd kept hidden on his phone. He stopped checking Emma's nonprofit website for updates. He let her go. It wasn't dramatic or cathartic. It was quiet and painful and necessary. Like setting a broken bone, it hurt, but it would heal stronger. 5 years after Emma's wedding, Min-ho was invited to speak at a fundraiser for educational nonprofits. He almost declined when he saw that Emma's organization was one of the beneficiaries, but something made him accept. The event was held at a hotel ballroom in Seoul. Min-ho gave his speech about the importance of ethical business practices in supporting community education. As he spoke, he scanned the audience and found Emma sitting near the back with a man who must be her husband. She looked happy, truly happy. There was a peace in her expression that hadn't been there at the San Francisco conference. Her husband's hand rested on her shoulder, a casual gesture of affection and support. After the speeches, there was a networking reception. Min-ho was talking with some donors when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Emma and her husband standing there. "Min-ho," Emma said, her voice warm but professional. "I wanted to introduce you to my husband, David." "David, this is Min-ho Kong. He's done some really impressive work in business ethics." Min-ho shook David's hand, trying not to notice how the man looked at Emma with such obvious love. "It's nice to meet you." "Likewise," David said. "Emma's told me about your Stanford days. Sounds like you were quite the study group." Min-ho glanced at Emma, wondering exactly what she'd told her husband about their history. She met his gaze calmly, a slight smile on her face that said she'd been honest but not cruel. "We had some good times," Min-ho said carefully. "Emma is one of the smartest people I know." "She is," David agreed, squeezing Emma's shoulder. "I'm lucky she took a chance on a high school calculus teacher." "I'm the lucky one," Emma said, looking up at her husband with genuine affection. They chatted for a few more minutes about the nonprofit's work, about Min-ho's firm, about safe professional topics. Then Emma and David excused themselves to talk with other donors. Min-ho watched them walk away, David's hand on the small of Emma's back, Emma laughing at something he said. And Min-ho felt okay, not happy, not sad, just okay. Emma had found someone who valued her, who made her laugh, who showed up for her every single day. That was what she deserved. That was what Min-ho had failed to give her, and he was genuinely glad she'd found it, even if it wasn't with him. Late that night, Min-ho sat in his office, looking out at the Seoul skyline. His phone buzzed with an email. It was from Emma. "Min-ho, it was good to see you tonight. I wanted to thank you for your support of the nonprofit over the years. I know the anonymous donations were from you. James finally admitted it after too much wine at Christmas. I also wanted you to know that I'm at peace with everything that happened between us. It took a long time, a lot of therapy, and finding someone who taught me what healthy love looks like. But I'm there now. I hope you've found peace too. You seemed lighter tonight, less burdened. That made me happy. You were my first love, Min-ho. That will always be true. But David is my last love, and I'm grateful for that. I wish you every happiness. Emma." Min-ho read the email 3 times. Then he wrote back, "Emma, thank you for those words. They mean more than you know. I have found a measure of peace, though it took me far longer than it should have. I'm glad you found David. From the few minutes I spent with you both, I could see that he values you the way you deserve to be valued. That's all I ever wanted for you, even when I was too broken and manipulated to give it to you myself. You were my first real love too. And though we didn't end up together, you taught me what love should be. I've tried to honor that lesson in how I live my life now. Be happy, Emma. That's all I've wanted for the last 18 years. Min-ho." He hit send before he could overthink it. 5 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a simple response. "Thank you, you too." And that was it. The final conversation. The real goodbye. Min-ho sat back in his chair, feeling something he hadn't felt in nearly 2 decades. Closure. He'd made a terrible mistake. He'd hurt someone he loved. He'd thrown away something precious, and he'd paid for it with years of regret and loneliness. But Emma had healed. She'd found happiness. And knowing that, Minho could finally forgive himself, not because he deserved forgiveness, not because what he'd done was okay, but because holding on to guilt forever served no one. It didn't undo the past. It didn't help Emma. It just kept him trapped in a moment he couldn't change. Minho looked at his reflection in the dark window. He was 48 now, gray threading through his hair at the temples. He'd spent half his life regretting one day. Maybe it was time to spend the rest of his life living differently. The next morning, Minho made some calls. Within a month, he'd established a scholarship fund for students from underprivileged backgrounds pursuing business degrees. It was funded entirely by his personal wealth, not Kang Corporation money. He wanted no connection to his father's influence. He named it the Emma Chen Education Fund. When Emma called him, surprised and touched, he simply said, "You're changing the world with your nonprofit. Let me help in the small way I can." "Minho, this is incredibly generous. But why use my name?" "Because you represent everything I should have been brave enough to choose," Minho said honestly. "And maybe it will remind other young people not to make the mistakes I made, to choose love over fear, to trust their instincts over manipulation." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Thank you. This will change so many lives." That's the hope. Over the next few years, the scholarship fund helped dozens of students. Minho met with recipients occasionally, sharing his story, carefully edited but honest about his mistakes. He told them about choosing family approval over personal happiness, about the cost of not trusting your own judgment, about how one bad decision could ripple through years. And he told them about forgiveness, how it was possible even after profound hurt, how it freed both the forgiver and the forgiven, how it was a gift you gave yourself as much as the other person. Some of the students came from backgrounds similar to Emma's, working-class families, first-generation college students, people who understood what it meant to fight for opportunities. When Minho saw their determination, their hope, their earnest belief in building better futures, he saw Emma as she'd been at Stanford, and it healed something in him, being able to help people like her. 20 years after the wedding that never was, Minho received an invitation to speak at Stanford's business school. The topic was ethical decision-making in family businesses, a subject he'd become somewhat famous for after publishing a book about his experiences. He accepted, even though returning to Stanford meant confronting memories he'd long since made peace with. The campus had changed, new buildings, different landscaping, but the essence remained the same. Minho walked past the library where he and Emma had first confessed their feelings, past the atrium where they'd collided on that first day, past the steps where they'd sat and dreamed about their futures. His speech was well received. Afterward, during the Q&A session, a young woman raised her hand. "Mr. Kang, in your book you talk about a relationship that ended because you chose family pressure over personal trust. Have you ever reconnected with that person? Do they know how much you've changed?" Minho smiled. "Yes, we've reconnected, and yes, she knows. She's built an amazing life and career, and I'm grateful to have played even a small part in supporting her work now. But some relationships, once broken in certain ways, can't be repaired romantically. And that's okay. Not every story has a happy ending where people get back together. Sometimes the happy ending is both people finding peace and moving forward separately." "Do you regret that?" the student pressed. "Every day," Minho admitted honestly. "But I've learned that regret can be a teacher. It's taught me to be brave enough to trust my own judgment, to value people over prestige, to understand that love requires courage, and I wasn't courageous when it mattered most." He paused. "The best I can do now is help others not make my mistakes. And if my story, as painful as it is, helps even one person choose differently, then maybe something good came from my failure." After the talk, Minho walked around campus one last time. It was sunset, the California light turning everything golden. He stood at the spot where he'd proposed to Emma, looking out at the view he'd seen in that gallery window years ago. "I'm sorry," he said quietly to the memory. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough. I'm sorry I let fear win. I'm sorry I hurt you." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of eucalyptus and possibility. "But I'm also grateful," Minho continued. "Grateful for the time we had. Grateful that you forgave me. Grateful that you found happiness. Grateful that you taught me what it means to really love someone, even though I learned the lesson too late to keep you." He stood there for a long time, saying goodbye to the ghost of who he'd been, the life he'd lost, the choices he couldn't undo. Then he walked away, back toward the campus and the car waiting to take him to the airport. Back toward his life in Seoul, a life of purpose, of teaching, of helping others avoid his mistakes. It wasn't the life he'd dreamed of at 28, standing at that altar. It wasn't a life with Emma, with children who had her laugh, with growing old together. But it was a good life, an honest life. A life built on the hard lessons learned from catastrophic failure transformed into purpose. And as Minho boarded the plane back to Seoul, he realized something that had taken 20 years to understand. Some mistakes don't get erased. They get integrated. They become part of who you are, teachers that never stop instructing, scars that remind you how to be gentle with others who are broken. He pulled out his phone one last time before takeoff and opened his notes app. He'd been writing there for years, thoughts, observations, moments of clarity. This time he wrote, "To my younger self at that altar, I understand why you walked away. You were scared, manipulated, convinced that protecting yourself meant destroying someone else. But here's what I wish you'd known. The pain of choosing wrong lasts so much longer than the fear of choosing right ever could have. To Emma, wherever you are tonight, thank you for teaching me what love looks like. Thank you for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for showing me, through your own healing, that people can survive their worst moments and still build beautiful lives. Your happiness has been my redemption. To everyone reading this someday, trust the people you love. When someone shows you who they are through years of consistent action, believe them over a folder of lies. Fear makes us cruel. Love makes us brave. Choose bravery, even when it costs you everything your family wants you to be." Minho read it over once, then saved it. Maybe he'd publish it someday. Maybe it would help someone facing their own impossible choice. Maybe one person would read it and choose differently than he had. The plane lifted into the night sky, Seoul's lights twinkling below like stars fallen to earth. Minho closed his eyes and, for the first time in 2 decades, didn't see Emma's face at the altar, tears streaming, world-shattering. Instead, he saw her at that Seoul fundraiser, laughing with her husband, peaceful and whole. That image, Emma healed, Emma happy, Emma free from the pain he'd caused, that was the real forgiveness. Not the words in an email or a brief conversation at a conference, but her genuine joy, built in a life that had nothing to do with him. He'd spent 20 years carrying his mistake like a stone in his chest, but Emma had spent those same years becoming lighter, freer, more fully herself. She'd won. Not because she'd gotten revenge or made him suffer. She'd never wanted that. She'd won because she'd refused to let his betrayal define her future. And in her victory, Minho found his peace. The flight attendant came by with drinks. Minho ordered water, took a sip, and opened his laptop. He had a presentation to refine for next week's business ethics seminar. The topic: When family loyalty becomes family manipulation, recognizing and resisting unethical pressure. He'd tell his story again, not for sympathy or absolution, but as a warning. Because somewhere out there, right now, another young person was facing pressure to choose family approval over personal integrity. Another Emma was being lied about, manipulated against. Another Minho was being fed false evidence about someone they loved. And if his story, painful, humiliating, regret-soaked as it was, could help even one of them choose differently, then maybe, just maybe, something meaningful had grown from the ashes of his greatest failure. The plane reached cruising altitude. Minho looked out the window at the darkness punctuated by distant lights, cities, lives, stories unfolding below. 20 years ago, he'd thought his story ended at that altar. That walking away from Emma meant walking towards something better, safer, more acceptable to the people whose approval he'd been taught to value above everything. He'd been catastrophically wrong. But the story didn't end there. It couldn't. Because stories don't end when we make mistakes. They transform. They become different stories, harder stories, stories about living with consequences and trying, imperfectly, to be better than we were. Minho's story had become one of redemption through acceptance. Not the Hollywood version where the hero wins back the girl, but the real version, where the hero learns to live with irreversible loss and tries to honor what he destroyed by helping others avoid his path. As the plane carried him home through the darkness, Minho thought about the scholarship recipients he'd meet next month. Young people full of hope and determination, carrying dreams similar to the ones Emma had carried at Stanford. He'd tell them, trust yourself. Trust the people who show up for you consistently. Don't let anyone convince you that love is weakness or that choosing happiness is betrayal. He'd tell them, some choices can't be undone. Choose wisely. Choose bravely. Choose love. And he'd tell them, if you do make the worst mistake of your life, don't waste decades pretending it didn't matter. Learn from it. Grow from it. Let it make you someone who helps others avoid the same pain. That was his purpose now, his penance, his path forward. And somehow, finally, it was enough. 3 days later, Minho stood in front of 200 business students at Seoul National University. The lecture hall was packed, students leaning forward in their seats, phones recording, notebooks open. Today, I want to talk about the most expensive decision I ever made, Minho began, his voice steady. It didn't cost money. It cost me the person I loved most in the world. The room went completely silent. 20 years ago, I stood at an altar in front of 300 people and walked away from my fiancée. I believed documents that said she'd betrayed me. I chose my family's version of truth over the woman who'd spent 2 years showing me nothing but honesty. I convinced myself I was protecting myself. In reality, I was destroying both of us. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. But you didn't know the documents were fake, right? How could you have known? Minho met her eyes. I knew Emma. I knew her character, her integrity, her heart. And I chose to believe papers with official seals over the evidence of who she'd been every single day we were together. That was my failure. Not ignorance, willful blindness because the lie was easier than standing up to my father. He paused, letting that sink in. Some of you in this room right now are facing pressure to choose family approval over personal truth. Some of you are being told that love is weakness, that trust is naive, that protecting the family reputation matters more than protecting the people you care about. Minho's voice grew stronger. I'm here to tell you, they're wrong. Choose the person who shows up for you consistently. Choose love over fear. Choose truth over comfort. Because I promise you, 20 years of regret weighs so much heavier than one moment of courage. After the lecture, a young man approached Minho. He looked nervous, clutching a folder against his chest. Professor Kang? My parents want me to break up with my girlfriend. They say she's not from the right background, but I love her. And after hearing your story, You're going to choose her, Minho said quietly. It wasn't a question. The young man nodded, tears in his eyes. I don't want to end up like you. I'm sorry, that sounds... Don't apologize, Minho interrupted. Please don't end up like me. Fight for her. Every single day if you have to. That's what I should have done. As the student walked away, Minho felt something shift in his chest. This was why he told his story. Not for forgiveness or redemption, but so that somewhere, right now, someone was choosing differently than he had. That night, Minho received an email notification. It was from the Emma Chen Education Fund. One of his scholarship recipients had just been accepted to Stanford's MBA program. The recipient's name was Sarah Park. In her acceptance letter, she'd written, "I'm the first person in my family to attend graduate school. Without this scholarship, Stanford would have been impossible. Thank you for believing in students like me." Minho stared at the screen, and for the first time in 2 decades, he smiled thinking about Stanford. Not with pain, but with purpose. Emma had wanted to create opportunities for students who came from backgrounds like hers. And now, through the fund that bore her name, dozens of students were getting those chances. He'd failed Emma in every way that mattered. But maybe, just maybe, by helping students like Sarah Park achieve dreams like Emma's, he was honoring what Emma had always believed in, that everyone deserved a chance regardless of background. It wasn't redemption. It would never erase what he'd done. But it was something, a legacy built from ashes, a purpose born from failure. Minho opened his notes app and wrote one more entry. "Dear Emma, Sarah Park just got into Stanford. She reminds me of you. Brilliant, determined, fighting for opportunities she deserves. The fund that carries your name just changed another life. I know you don't need updates from me. You've built your own beautiful legacy through your nonprofit. But I wanted you to know, your name is still changing lives, still opening doors, still giving hope to students who need someone to believe in them. Thank you for that, for being the kind of person worth naming a scholarship after, for showing me what real integrity looks like, even though I didn't recognize it when it mattered. You won, Emma. You always win. Because you never stopped being exactly who you were, someone who believes in possibility, even for people who don't deserve your grace. I hope you're happy tonight. I hope David tells you he loves you. I hope your life is everything you dreamed of when we sat in that library, planning futures we thought we'd share. You deserved all of it. You always did. M." He didn't send it. He never sent these letters, but writing them helped, acknowledging the truth, naming the loss, accepting the permanent gap between what was and what should have been. Minho closed his laptop, stood, and walked to his apartment window. Seoul glowed beneath him, millions of lives unfolding in the city where he'd been born, where he'd run from his mistake, where he'd finally learned to live with it. Somewhere out in that city, young people were making choices about love, family, truth, integrity. Some would choose wisely. Others would make mistakes they'd spend lifetimes trying to understand. Minho couldn't save them all, couldn't protect everyone from the pain of wrong choices, but he could tell his story. Could stand in lecture halls and say, "I chose wrong, don't be me." And sometimes, like today, with that young man clutching his folder, someone would listen. That had to be enough. That was all the redemption he would ever get. And finally, Minho accepted that it was. What do you think? Did Minho deserve forgiveness, or was Emma right to move on without him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on trust, betrayal, and whether some mistakes are too big to overcome. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional narratives like this. Rate this story from 0 to 10, and let us know what kind of stories you'd like to see next. Thank you for being part of this journey with us.